And in a moment, I'll be joined by Maureen from Wyoming Liberty Group, who's talking about the important topic. Well, and a lot of states, not just here in Wyoming. This is why if you're from Wyoming, don't just, it's not just you that I'm talking to. Folks in South Dakota, it's important that you listen to this as well. It's important that Montana, North Dakota, Nebraska, you listen as well because, well, here we are all engaged in Common Core as part of it. And so as we're engaged in this new form of thinking with our schools,
there we go.
It turns out that, well, they're going to need information. And so joining us from Wyoming Liberty Group is Maureen. Good to see you again, Maureen. Wait, I always have the music. You need music, I guess. Okay.
I think we're good. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I guess you guys suffered a crash because I saw you blink out for a second there. I got something.
I think we're all good now, though.
Before we get into the topic that you have, this is a side note. Nick DeLocke, Campbell County Observer, just handed this to me, and I figured this is right up your alley. Are you, Maureen, having trouble with the idea of how much you're going to have to pay for insurance through Obamacare?
I am uninsured now, and I will be uninsured in the future. No, I'm not worried about how much I'm going to have to pay.
Because if that became a problem for you, there is a dating site called Sugar Daddy. You can find a man that will make enough money to afford Obamacare for you. Someone's putting up a website. I will get into that in the next half hour. I don't know why the nation's gone insane, Maureen. It's just absolutely gone. But we're talking about data mining your kids, which I think is an early age to mine them, because I guess apparently we need to know everything about your kids. We need to watch your kids from the moment they're born all the way until they retire, because that's what good free people do. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. We've got an education system in crisis. So the government is scrambling around trying to figure out how to fix it. Instead of kind of going back and saying, maybe the problem is government, it's saying, no, what we need to do is make the system more accountable to government. So instead of sort of saying, look, maybe what the government needs to do is step back and return the accountability to where it should be, which is, of course, is with the parents, the children, and the schools, they're trying to create this great big data system that will have all kinds of miraculous effects, like create productive citizens. So essentially what the government is really doing is using children and families as a guise to collect all kinds of data on children, right from, in fact, pre-kindergarten right through their university years.
Okay, now what kind of data could they possibly be interested in at that young age?
Well, all kinds of data. All kinds of data about their family. So what's happening is that you've got here in Wyoming, we already have a big data system in the education system. It's called WISE. And what I've done just very recently, and you can go to our website, wyliberty.org, I published a new Liberty Brief, and what that does is explain what is already existing in this Wyoming integrated statewide data system. This is one component. So this education data system, which already exists, which contains a unique identifier for children, student level enrollment, demographic, and program participation information, and all kinds of things about the teachers and perhaps even about the families. We don't quite have that level of information yet. What it does, what will happen now that the state is engaging in what I call a statewide longitudinal data system, it's in the process of creating that. What that'll do is feed into that system. The statewide longitudinal data system, what I like to call the data leviathan, will include information from the education department. It'll also include information from family services, from corrections, from health, and they're expecting all kinds of other agencies to join in with this and provide information into the system that then will be shared throughout the different agencies.
Well, now, when you say different agencies, do you mean federal agencies as well?
Well, this is the thing, ultimately what can happen is this information is designed to be shared. Well, it'll be shared by whom? Well, it'll be shared by all these different agencies, but ultimately, as we've already seen in the past, is the federal government will somehow or another find ways probably to try to get this data as well. I mean, these systems that the government puts together, I mean, as we've seen with the Obamacare system, the Obamacare Exchange system, these data systems don't work very well. They tend to be extremely expensive. And of course, what this particular system will do is leave the data of some of our most innocent citizens available for pedophiles to hack into. You know, this is one of the biggest problems, and you see a lot of people who have experiencing corrections who'll say, look, you know, this is really a bad way to go. You can't keep all this data. You can't keep it all in one place. Sharing it around is really dangerous. It's really a bad way to go about doing it. But I think part of the reason we are in this situation now is because building this system was never discussed in the legislature. Because where this all started from, I think people have become more aware of it now because everyone is totally outraged about this Common Core initiative. But this whole federal program to try to capture your child's data goes all the way back to 2002. It was in 2005 when millions, if not billions, of federal dollars were dedicated towards this to try to essentially bribe states into getting on board with the data Leviathan system, because all the states are doing this now, Wyoming included. So what then happened was that in 2009, to further create an incentive for states to jump on board, the federal government said, look, if you want stimulus money, you have to agree to build Leviathan. So of course, Wyoming took money from the federal government under the stimulus program. It is now essentially on the hook to build Leviathan. But when the Wyoming Department of Education went back to the two federal agencies that are specifically tasked with handing out federal money to the states to build Leviathan, Wyoming's application for funding for Leviathan was denied. So then what happened, it really seems like in order to continue this fiscal fiction, essentially, that the state is going to build and fund Leviathan with federal funds, it had to scramble around and try to figure out some way to make it look like federal funds were still actually going to be paying for at least the startup. So and I think part of the reason, and this is actually a very complicated story, it's all laid out in my Data Leviathan paper that's on our website, wyliberty.org, in the Liberty Brief section. And I think a big reason why legislators never really clued into this is because it's really, really complicated. So essentially, the state of Wyoming is part of the school and library program of the Universal Service Fund. All of us pay a tax on our telecommunications and internet service, and it goes to this Universal Service Fund. The Universal Service Administration Company then funnels some of that money back to states through this E-rate funding program. So what happened in Wyoming between right around 2005 for a couple of years was that their application for E-rate funds to fund school and library interconnectivity had been denied. They appealed that denial, and eventually they won that appeal. They got a big whack of cash back into what they called then the E-rate deferred revenue account. And then what that essentially did was leave money available, federal money supposedly available to fund Leviathan. So I think it was in 2012, there's a sort of a footnote to the budget bill that explains how the money is taken out of the Department of Education, put into the school foundation account, made unavailable for the Department of Education to spend on school and library interconnectivity, which is what what money is really for, and made available to spend on Leviathan. So that roughly $8 million was set aside as the startup funds to start getting this Data Leviathan project going, because it's not very, even right now, the enterprise technology bureaucracy that's in charge of essentially putting the Leviathan together has only just gone out with a request for proposals to companies to come in and say, look, this is how we're going to build this Leviathan system. So I think if we really, what this backdoor source of funding did was sort of hide the fact that the government is in fact engaging in a program that's going to capture all kinds of children's private information, put it into a great big statewide data system. If they had in fact gone in the normal way to the legislature and put together a bill and said, look, we need 8 million, or in fact at the end of the day, at least for the first 5 years, this system is going to cost 18 million. If they had been a little bit more upfront about it, said we weren't able to get the money for it, what we need to do is put a bill together, go to appropriations, get it approved, get the money for it. There would have been a discussion on the floor at the legislature. And I have a very strong feeling, based on what happened last week in the Judiciary Committee, that if this discussion had been more open, and if legislators actually had known about it, and if people had actually realized what was going on, we would not be in a situation now where there's a potential anyway to put your child's information into this data leviathan to be made available statewide, federal government, to the governor, to whatever stakeholder happens to make some kind of case that they should have access to this information.
What is the purpose of all of this information? Is it a personality profile, or why gather it for what purpose?
Well, this is the thing. The purpose supposedly is to be able to make data-driven decisions, so that the government can see whether or not their latest educational experiment or family services experiment or corrections experiment is actually working, instead of taking a step back and saying, look, it's the government is creating the problem here. So what happened last week in Judiciary is that a bill came forward that would give family services $500,000 that they would be able to use then to create a juvenile justice data system. This bill actually failed in committee because the House legislators who saw this said, holy cow, this is horribly intrusive. I mean, imagine if you had a son, he's 15 years old, he gets caught for possession of cigarettes. That is going to go into a big data system. It's going to then, not only his name, rank and serial number, basically his social insurance number, all the kind of information about the family is going to go into this system. And then what's going to happen is it's going to get shared around. Essentially, you've completely lost control of the information of your child. There was no way at all, I mean, there was no process involved at all that would say, well, look, at this particular time, we're going to actually delete this. It's just going to be there, according to this one legislator, forever. They said, this is just completely outrageous. We're going to nix this bill. And so that's not going to come out as a committee bill. So I think the next time we see this come up, there's going to be $1.35 million, the request from the Enterprise Technology System for general funds for this particular Leviathan. That's going to allow this to be discussed at the legislature, and then suddenly the legislators are going to realize, holy cow, they're talking about building this system that's going to hold this kid's information for the rest of their life, and it's going to be a complete violation, really, of their privacy. So I think people need to become very aware of this. They need to call their legislator. They need to say, look, this has to be defunded. There is no way our kids' information should go into this system.
Well, and I gotta go because of the clock here, but you know what also bothers me about this, Maureen, and I should, if I can find these again, I'll send you the articles. In some national data links, which are not just Obamacare, but some other NSA sites, I think I have something on this on my reading assignment page today. It turns out that people within these organizations, IRS, CIA, NSA, Homeland Security, on and on it goes, some people have been sharing information, even selling information, who are employees of these groups, and some people are leaking information because they have a grudge against somebody who, an employee inside, let's say the NSA, has a personal grudge, and so they go up and leak that person's information. So, yeah, this is something that could haunt your kids for the rest of their lives.
That's right, not to mention you.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention me. Thank you, Maureen.
Friendly and helpful.